Americans in that they don't want a government that is so obtrusive that it's in every aspect of their lives. And I think there are a lot of things common to people across the country that I think the vast majority of Americans think that collecting all of our phone records is a government that's gone too far. I think the majority of Americans actually think that the war in Iraq was a mistake and then going back is a mistake. So I think there are a lot of things that we have in common with Iowa voters and also with voters across America.
Senator, the Associated Press is reporting that there are some concerns about whether or not the FBI is able to obtain some of the records on these two shooters who were involved. Do you think that the metadata program could have helped prevent this attack, and are you still comfortable with where you stand on this?
The interesting thing is you realize the metadata program was ongoing throughout these attacks and also with the Paris attacks. So those who clamor to give up more liberty for a false sense of security really aren't paying any attention. You know, Senator Rubio has been out there saying, oh, we need to spy on Americans, we need to collect all Americans' records. Well, we have been. It hasn't worked. In France, they have a program similar to ours, but on steroids. It's 1,000 times more intrusive, 1,000 times less protections of privacy, and they weren't able to grasp or understand that the attack was going to happen in Paris. So no, I think you can catch terrorists if you have a more focused approach, if you use the Fourth Amendment, obey the Constitution, use suspicion, have warrants, name the individual. I'm all for looking at the records of terrorists. I'm just not for looking at the records of all Americans. And I don't think it has actually helped us or prevented any attacks. And I'm not willing to give up my liberty or yours for a false sense of security.
Do you think the FBI should be able to access any records related to this couple now that this has happened?
Anytime you have suspicion, you name someone, you ask a judge, and sure, particularly after the fact, it's particularly easy. But even with the Boston bombers, in advance of the bombing, if I were the judge and you called me and said, can I look at the computers of this boy who's been to Chechnya, the Russians have suggested that he's been radicalized, we have suspicion. See, suspicion's not proof. This is what people don't understand. When you call a judge and you say we have suspicion, it's a very low threshold for getting a warrant. Almost any time on any street in America when the police call a judge at night and say, we think there's a murderer in the house, we think there's a rapist in the house, they almost always get permission. But it's individualized. And this is the big crux of the debate that people don't quite understand is, it's whether or not we're going to look at individuals for whom we are suspicious, or whether we're going to look at all Americans. If you want to give up all of your privacy, I'm not your guy, I'm the wrong candidate. But I think there needs to be somebody in the race who does want to defend the Fourth Amendment and does want to defend your right to privacy.
Senator, justice reform, if we do not reform our justice system as far as nonviolent offenders are concerned, can the heavy hand of government continue to plague us as far as civil assets forfeiture and that type of thing? What are we looking at in the future if we do not examine criminal justice reform?
I think criminal justice reform is something that's bringing the right and the left together. But I will tell you that there are a lot of instances of there are still many problems out there. I was at a barbershop today in Waterloo. The guy had a youthful offense 20 some odd years ago, but it still would prevent him from getting work because it was a felony conviction. It was nonviolent, it was drug related, and I told him I would help him. And this is something that I actually agree with the president on. We should have criminal justice reform. And I have 10 different bills to try to reform our criminal justice system. One of the key things they did in California is they took a lot of minor non-violent drug felonies and they made them misdemeanors. That went a long way towards having more room in the prisons for violent criminals, but it also went a long way towards people not losing their voting rights and also not losing their opportunity or ability to get a job. And I'm going to keep working on this.
Senator, after the San Bernardino shooting, do you think there should be any limits on the
After the what?
After the shooting in California.
Who are you and what outlet are we with?
With the ABC. Do you think there should be any limits on the visa program, specifically the P1 fiancé visa?
Yeah, this is a big difference I have with Marco Rubio. Yes, I think to defend the country, Marco Rubio wants to collect all of your records and give up your privacy. I want to say let's have some control of the border and let's have border security. And I introduced an amendment that said, look, we ought to just halt the immigration from countries that have radical Islamist movements for a while until we know who's here. Why do I say that? There's 11 million people in our country right now, 40% of them overstay their visa. There's 150,000 students from the Middle East. If 40% of them are overstaying our visa, I want them to go back home. I want somebody to know their name. I want somebody to know, are they in college? Are they obeying our laws? You don't have an automatic right to come to our country. There ought to be laws, and I think there needs to be a pause on the immigration system from the Middle East until we know if we can guarantee that the people coming here are not coming here to attack.
Senator, you mentioned Marco Rubio a couple of times, but your colleague Ted Cruz has eaten into your support among Liberty voters. Why do you think that is?
Say again?
Senator Ted Cruz, your other colleague, has made inroads with Liberty voters, eaten into some of your support. Why do you think that is?
I think when you look at the Liberty vote within Iowa, we're doing quite well. 9 out of 10 of those who were on the Central Committee who were supporters of my dad are supporting me. When we call the folks and we look and we poll the folks, we still think the vast majority of the Liberty vote is coming to us. We're not as concerned about that. I'm more concerned with Marco Rubio because I think he's quickly becoming the establishment candidate as Bush fades. And as he becomes the establishment candidate, I'm very concerned that both he and Hillary Clinton are for regime change. I think regime change and nation building are bad philosophies, and I think there's not a dime's worth of difference between Hillary Clinton and Marco Rubio on these things. But they've been dead wrong for the past several decades, and they have endangered the country. The idea that toppling Gaddafi was a good idea was a very, very much a mistaken notion. When Hillary Clinton, President Obama, and Marco Rubio all said, let's topple Gaddafi, we got a disaster. We got chaos there, the rise of radical Islam, and now what you have in Libya is a third of Libya pledges allegiance to ISIS. So I would say that Rubio, Clinton, Obama, all those who want to intervene in the Middle East and recreate some sort of Jeffersonian democracy over there, they've been wrong, but they've made us less safe by what they've advocated.
Senator, what about some of your other opponents? Texas Senator Ted Cruz, also Donald Trump. They've been very aggressive in their response to the shooting and saying how we need to go after ISIS. Do you think that their rhetoric goes too far? Is it warmongering?
Well, the idea of whether or not we can ultimately have a long-lasting victory and a long-lasting peace over there with it being done by U.S. soldiers, I disagree with anyone who thinks that that's true. Can we defeat ISIS? Yeah, we can defeat ISIS in 2 months. You want to put 1 million troops in the Middle East, we can defeat them in 2 months. But the question is, how many weeks or how many months until the ideology spawns a new generation of people who comes up? This is a problem that ultimately is going to be fixed with some degree of permanence when civilized Islam rises up and says that this barbaric form of Islam is not our religion. When that happens, I think there can be a permanent peace. But these are all Sunni towns. Every town that ISIS occupies is a Sunni Muslim town. They're not going to accept the Shiites from Baghdad. They're not going to accept Europeans, and they're not going to accept Americans for a lasting peace. Can we do it militarily? Yes. But how do you prevent another generation or another iteration of this from forming? Islam has to be boots on the ground, Arab boots on the ground, and they have to say, you know, this does not represent Islam. When that happens, and when this becomes branded as an aberration of Islam, as not true Islam, that's when you have a chance for peace. But there's a reaction to every action. And so if Americans do this, we will engender and have another generation of a reaction to our presence.
So you're opposed to the carpet bombing that Ted Cruz has proposed?
I'm not opposed to having some air support. I'm not opposed to arming the Kurds directly. The Kurds can be a big part of the answer. They live there, they have roots there, they're pro-American, they're not into the crazy aberration that is ISIS, and I think they can be a big part of the solution. The Turks can be a part of the solution. And then the other thing is, ultimately, we need to point out the naivete of people like Carly Fiorina and Rubio and others who say, oh, we're not going to talk to Russia. We're going to have a no-fly zone in an airspace where Russia already flies. I can't imagine that we have people in our country that think that that's a sane foreign policy, to say we are going to begin shooting down Russian fighters who are flying in an airspace in which they were invited for better or worse. I got to have 1 or 2 more.
Senator, the New York Times today had a front page editorial about gun control. Do you think there's any validity in the argument that should be more strict, particularly with assault weapons?
Not many people in Kentucky read the New York Times. Not many people in Iowa read the New York Times, and frankly, I don't think they represent many people outside of New York City, probably, or outside the Beltway in Washington. We have the strictest gun control in the country in California. That's where these guns were purchased. I haven't seen any indication that People are saying there's not enough gun control in California. If people want to ban ownership of guns and they think that's how we're going to stop these shootings, they need to call for an amendment to the Constitution to repeal the Second Amendment. Short of that, I think we need to acknowledge that the stricter the laws become, those of us who obey the laws will obey the laws, and those, if you're going to go kill 15 people, do you think a gun control law is going to stop you? You know, so I mean, we have registration, we have background checks. They're buying the guns legally. Unfortunately, not only this terrorist act, but all the crazy mass shootings, it tends to be the first activity for these people. They're not repeat suicide bombers. It's a one-time thing.
Do you support universal background check?
I think that's what they have in California. It didn't work. So the question is, why? I mean, if it didn't work and it's not working, why would you do it? The thing you have to look at is the commonalities here. In most of the mass shootings, other than this recent one, which was terrorism, in most of the mass shootings, you have a couple of common things. They've been white teenagers, they've been obsessed a lot of times with video games, they've been loners, and then they've been people with mental illness, and they go to places without defenses. So I think one of the ways, if you want to help and you want to try to prevent mass shootings, you should be in favor of allowing people to defend themselves. So every school in America should peel down all the signs that say we are defenseless. And they should all put up another sign that says we are going to defend ourselves. You come in here at your own peril. We should do the same on all of our planes. Every commercial airline should say we are armed. In fact, our government is so pitiful and so bad at doing things that less and less of our pilots are armed because the program, like every other government program we create, is so onerous that the pilots are no longer going through the process of being armed. So self-defense works, and guns can be a way of defending and deterring attack. Thanks, everybody.
All right, guys.